You're listening to Art Destinations, a podcast where we host fortnightly conversations with artists and thinkers living and or working on islands to see how these unique places shape imaginations. This season will be set in Tasmania, following on from our Venice series. Hello, my name is Sarah Rhodes, an artist based in Lutruwita, Tasmania. We're talking with Zoe Grey, the 28-year-old artist who has just won one of the most lucrative art awards in Australia, the Hadley's Art Prize, worth $100,000, for her painting The Shape of Rock. The annual Acquisitive Art Prize is awarded to the most outstanding portrayal of the Australian landscape. In an unusual twist of fate, Zoe won the Hadley's Packing Room Prize only days earlier, testifying the strength of the work. Zoe is being shown at Sydney Contemporary 2024 in September by the James Macon Gallery and is represented by Despard Gallery in Hobart. On our Instagram page, artdestinations.podcast, you can see the prize-winning work, The Shape of Rock, some of her other works, and pictures of her childhood in Marrawah. Subscribe to Art Destinations on your hosting platform so you don't miss an episode, and even leave a review. Your contribution supports us. Hi Zoe, welcome to Art Destinations Tasmania. It's great to have you here.
Hi Sarah, thanks for having me on. It's really, really nice to be with you.
So it's really exciting for us to be talking to you because your work is really about the feeling of being on an island. You might not overtly be doing that, but when we were discussing earlier, I felt as though a lot of the themes that you're exploring are exactly the themes that we have been exploring through the Venice season, and in the PhD that I was writing about this, the sense of being on an island, the sense of belonging that you were describing was really coming through. So this is lovely and particularly interesting because you grew up in a really remote town called Marrawah on the west coast of Tasmania, which is on the very top left, top western corner. And I've been to Marrawah and I've watched the sets of waves come in, and usually on an east coast Australian beach, when you're looking out, it's just one set. But there's like 3 sets of waves that come in and they're really, really wild. And then when you look out, you're just imagining what landmass is there. So I looked at the map the other day and you don't hit Africa, which I thought you did. You just go underneath Africa, South Africa, and you land in Argentina. And then if you keep going around, you land just north of Wellington in the Wairarapa. And then you come back to the east coast of Tasmania, right in the top northeast tip at a place called Muscle Row Bay. So Marrawah is very south and pretty remote. So what was it like growing up there as a child?
You know, your childhood is your childhood and you don't know any different. So yeah, I guess for me, like looking back, I can see parts of my childhood that were perhaps like quite unique in terms of, you know, the remoteness and having a really close relationship with the environment around me due to the weather. You know, we were a family of surfers, so very influenced by the wind and the waves and the weather, as well as like my parents were an organic beef farm. So that's, you know, totally influenced, you know, you're working outside. My parents had a veggie garden. My dad was fishing, catching us fish to eat. So, you know, our lifestyle and growing up there was very much influenced by the environment and the landscape around us, which, you know, probably at the time I would be like a 10-year-old being like, oh, Dad, I don't want to help you move the cows, or like, can't we have something different for dinner or whatever. But like looking back at it, I guess is like quite a romantic lens that I see it through, I guess, of like this building a close relationship with the natural world from a very early age. And I guess that kind of remoteness and isolation has given me values and a sense of identity that I still carry with me today. And yeah, I guess living remotely and in isolation, growing up, like you have less things and often less opportunities for sports and schools and all those kind of things. So yeah, there's certainly like a simplification, I guess, and like a lessness that comes with living rurally and remotely that I think was good for me to learn and to grow up with. It's something I really value now, you know, and it's an environment that I would like to raise my children in if I one day have them, because it's a unique upbringing. You know, I was at a school with 35 kids, you know, it's so tiny, and of course you don't know any different, but I think that sort of speaks to a lot of people who grow up in rural areas. My dad inherited the farm from his mum and dad, who were also born in Marrawah, and their parents were also in Marrawah, so it's sort of like this, it was a strong sense of family, I guess, tied up in that place as well.
And you were a surfer?
Yeah. And, you know, surfing is still such a big part of my identity. You know, between that and painting, that's really the two things or art making, you know, they're the two things that I align with, see myself as. But growing up, we were so lucky that our family home, which is still the family home, was right on the water. So, you know, just sort of 20 metres or so onto the rocks and then the ocean. So my dad was a surfer, and there was a little wave out the front of our house. And so because Dad surfed and then my brother did, and I just wanted to do everything that he did, and being in that environment and understanding from a really early age what surfing meant and what it was and how it meant you lived your life, which is just totally focused on following the waves and the weather. You know, I had that understanding and wanted to explore that as well. But in terms of like the experience, you know, growing up, there weren't any other kids at my school that surfed. Like me and my brother, oddly, were kind of on our own in that field. You know, cricket was really big and football was really big and hockey, but surfing was like kind of this thing on the outskirts. So it would often just be me and my brother surfing together, particularly through the winter. It's very quiet, and my dad. So there's a handful of older local surfers who have always surfed there and still do, so you often be surfing with them. Yeah, it can, you know, it's a pretty rugged coastline, so you're sitting out there in what can be like rough, windy, often windy, more often than not very windy, rough seas. Yeah, powerful swell, as opposed, like I said, you know, it's coming straight out of the Southern Ocean. There's nothing to soften it. There's no landmass to slow it down, just deep water that, you know, keeps that momentum up. So, you know, powerful waves. Being a surfer, it gave me a different perspective on the landscape, I guess, because when you're in the water, you're looking back at the land and the forms of the coast, as opposed to being on the land and looking out to the sea. So I've always quite enjoyed viewing or experiencing the landscape from the ocean and, you know, looking back at the rocks and the land, and, you know, there's a lot of movement around you, and being in the ocean kind of enforces this presence, I guess, or this focus, or need to be quite aware of your surroundings because things are moving and waves are coming and rips are there and all those things. So yeah, it's like quite an immersive experience being in the ocean. It's like kind of spiritual, I guess. Can be a form of meditation, can be a form of gratefulness towards the ocean, or like it has such a presence that, you know, when I'm away from, you know, when I spend time inland, I have a deep sense of being unsettled when I'm away from the ocean for too long. And, you know, that's because it's familiar to me. I grew up looking at it every single day of my life and being in it most days of my life, and so was my family. You know, it's a deep sense of that's what I do and that's what we do, and that's part of who I am and where I come from and my family as well.
Okay, that's lovely. So how does that relate to your art making process?
I mean, like I said, I think there's ways that it's influenced my work, you know, formally or visually, in terms of understanding different perspectives and ways of being within the landscape and wanting to sort of represent that in my painting or in my art making. You know, the sense of being within the landscape and moving within it and moving around you. You know, I experience that when I'm surfing and I'm in the ocean, and that's certainly an idea that I'm interested in my painting, is creating a sense of feeling within and shifting perspectives and not a structured kind of scene. And I think that's influenced by engaging with the landscape through surfing and movement and weather and change and all those things. And then, of course, I guess it's also inextricably linked. Like, growing up near the ocean means that connection is there to surfing, and that familiarity of the ocean then, totally makes up my identity, which is therefore all I want to paint, which is, the coastal environment and the ocean, because this is a place that I'm connected to, and I want to unpack that connection and explore that in my art making, which is, it's all kind of linked and connected, the ocean and surfing and my work and then, my sense of identity as well.
Okay. So we could quickly focus on or scoot to Svalbard, because you just come back from a residency in Svalbard near the Arctic, the Norwegian archipelago. You were describing Marrawah and it's, facing the Southern Ocean, and then you were up in Svalbard, in the Arctic. And did you have a shared feeling or experience being there, just like being here?
I think I probably thought that I would have more comfort there, or it would be more similar there in that sense of isolation and rawness and ruggedness of the environment and all those things. Going in, I sort of assumed that I would have some kind of like leg up for that, I guess. But Svalbard was totally different to anywhere I'd ever been in the world in so many ways. And I found that there weren't many, for me, similarities or comforts immediately. And I think that came from the inaccessibility of the landscape for me as somebody travelling there. You have to have a rifle and a flare gun for polar bear protection leaving the settlement. So I didn't have those things, so I was really restricted to town, the infrastructure and the built environment of the town. So that was like totally not unfamiliar to me, but not my place of comfort, which was an interesting thing to learn, that it all be reminded of, I guess, that having that interaction with the natural world is so important for me to feel grounded in a place. Even so much as there's these amazing, jaw-dropping, immense mountains that you can see but can't go. For me, I couldn't. There was times I went with guides and met people who could take me, and that was a whole incredible experience. And once I finally got to get out, it was extremely satisfying and fulfilling being out in the landscape. And even so much as I know that when I was there and experienced kind of this sense of displacement or unfamiliarity, knowing that I really wanted to I was like, if I just go to the ocean, if I can find the edge of the sea, I can orientate myself, and that will soothe me. But even then, the edge of the sea was kind of like this industry factory area that was kind of tidal and muddy and on the boundary of town. So I was sort of unsure whether I could enter that or not with the polar bears. And yeah, it was a flop basically trying to access this. So I guess the things that I learned, that for me, the way you can access and experience forms of isolation and remoteness and, parts of the natural environment that I really adore in Marrawah in Tasmania was not as accessible for me in the time that I had and the skills and the knowledge and the research that I'd done in Svalbard. Obviously, you can have extreme experiences of isolation travelling outside the settlement and being alone and in these mountains. And I did some trips out guided and trips on boats that was, astonishing and totally removed from, any towns or structures that were just so remote, and such a sense of feeling far away. Yeah, it was a big learning experience in both recognising the ways in which I relate to places of significance to me, and what's important in that, you know, the landscape and engaging and experiencing place through the ocean and walking in the coast. And then, and then what happens when I'm not able to do that and how that makes me feel and the sense of longing and homesickness that I felt, as well as like a total experience of awe in the landscape that I could see around me and that I got to experience eventually. Yeah, there's a lot going on.
So can you describe what it was like when you first landed?
Yeah, well, I was at the Spitsbergen artist residency, which I was just looking before. I'm not sure if it's still running. I know that they were having some trouble with funding, but I had heard quite close to my arrival that the woman running the residency was going to be away. So that was like a small worry, I guess. Maybe not worry, but I was like, that's unfortunate. And then when I arrived on the island, flying in was a huge feeling of, I guess, adventure and excitement, nervousness. And yeah, when I did arrive, somebody was there to pick me up, and they notified me that the other residents that were meant to be at this residency had left early and were away. So I was going to be totally alone in the residency with nobody, no other residents there, and the owner away. So I got my supplies from the supermarket and dropped me at this residency, and which was like a 2-kilometre walk out of town. And there was a little art centre underneath that there were people around and working. But yeah, I kind of had this like few hours of walking around and looking around and sort of just taking it all in and feeling extremely, I guess, excited, or like a feeling of I can't believe I'm here on this island on the other side of the world. And then at some stage in the afternoon that turned to like quite a dawning sensation of how far away I was and what is this place and how do I engage with it and where am I and what am I doing and why do I do this to myself and why do I, try and find these obscure islands on the other side of the world to visit? What am I trying to prove? Like, what am I doing? And that kind of was an experience that continued for a few days into settling into the place. And it's a very unique place, and it's an industry town, it's a company town, it's Norwegian, but it's super international. You don't have to have a visa to live there. There's lots of cultural stuff going on, and even like visually, the buildings, and there's not a lot of. It's a really difficult place to navigate and understand the context of the community there and the transientness of the people that live there, and it's totally unusual in many ways, and I was trying to kind of understand this on my own with no guidance, which was really tricky. And then once I did sort of manage to meet some people and figure out what was going on, it's also my lack of, or naivety and a lack of research going there, I think, which was intentional. I wanted to, not look too much into it before I went.
It sounds like the couple of things of no one being around is a bit out of your control, and no amount of research could have really helped you through that. So in terms of how you used your days and how, because you just had an exhibition at Svalbard Gallery once you came home, so what was the process? Were you making work there, or did you make studies there and then make work later? What is your process?
For that residency, I did have a beautiful studio that looked out on the mountains, and so there I was drawing, mostly making work on paper, so drawing, ink, charcoal, and doing a lot of studies, a lot of drawings. And some of these were about the place around me and the connections that I was building with the place, and the wanting to kind of connect to the place through making and drawing, and understand the landscape around me through making work and recording it and processing this experience through the making. And also a lot of writing in my journal and taking notes about what was going on around me. And a big influence was, an unignorable influence was the vast mountains that was totally surrounding me from all angles. And that was very endlessly interesting to look out at those and try and capture each mark and fold and little bend in those in different lights. And every time you'd look out the window, it would just be this changing scene. Yeah, so I was making work like that. I didn't really make work out in the landscape, which is becoming less and less important to my practice anyway. But yeah, obviously it was not super possible to get out and be drawing out in the field. And I made some sort of paintings as well, but it was super playful, experimental study. I probably made like 30 or 40 different drawings, some on cheap butcher's paper, some on good, like just producing and capturing and making. And in residencies you also have that space to be playful that you don't always get in your studio at home. So, and then, yeah, I made, I kind of gathered all this and I stopped at another residency in northern Norway on the way home, and similar process in terms of a different experience, but similar process in terms of drawing and making. And once I was back here in Tassie, I made the large scale paintings from that.
Okay, so could you describe them to us?
They're abstract paintings that allude to the landscape, and they're about understanding connection to place or reflecting on a place of significance to me, and also this new place and how that informed. They're a kind of amalgamation of visually in the paintings themselves. There's parts of Marrawah and there's also parts of my experience in Norway and the parts of the landscape there that I sought out, like trying to find the ocean's edge, and in Norway, nestling down in the rocky shores on these little islands and feeling that was a really similar experience to being in the rocks at home. And in one painting in particular, when your heartbeat falls between feeling and sound, which is about the stillness of the ocean, and being within those rocks and my vision being only rocks and ocean, and feeling a deep sense of comfort. And I wanted to recreate that in a painting, that feeling of being within. And also it spoke of my time away. I was forever trying to find parts of these new places that felt familiar to me, that I could seek comfort in when I was feeling far from home. So that painting, and a lot of the paintings are kind of touching on the seeking similarities and finding the familiar in place. And, they speak of longing and of home and the importance of home and that in my identity, and learning all these things when I was away. And yeah, they're as much about home as they are away, and blurring abstract works between both of them, but connected through my feelings towards those places and my experience of those places.
It's very difficult to go to a new place and make, authentic work. I mean, especially that's the difference really between someone who's knows something and a tourist, really. So it was probably a really clever idea to connect with home.
Totally. I think it would have been naive otherwise.
So rocks really feature in your work, and for me, rocks seem to have a spirituality, I feel. And what I've found is that when I go to different places in Tasmania, the rocks that are older seem to speak to me with a louder voice, with a stronger voice. And then when I look and I Google, different towns and which areas have older rocks, I kind of, develop this idea. Rocky Cape or in Queenstown, they've got really ancient rocks. And so I'm just curious, with rocks being part of your work and you being so deeply connected to the places that you're making work about, I was wondering, what your relationship with rocks is.
I'm so drawn to rocks, and it's such a innate, integral part of my practice, that's something that I don't actually interrogate that often. I often think that, you know, it's like more this acceptance of like rocks are part of my work and I'm so interested in them. And I think there's a couple of things going on. I think formally they are endlessly interesting to me, their shape and their form, and drawing that and capturing that. And adding a rock form to a painting can be a detail, it can be a total compositional shift, it can be this big abstract thing or this smaller fine line thing. You know, I can use them formally in so many different ways in my paintings, and I do, and they're abstracted, and they can, you know, they're just these forms that I keep returning to in my work. But I also think there's a connection in that, like, they are the space between the land and the sea most often. Well, my sort of the way I think about rocks. I mean, I think about the ones that are on the shore and the ones that were between my house and the ocean, and the ones that I learnt to walk over and play on when I was little. You know, I grew up next to the rocks on the point where I'm from. And so, again, there's like that deep sense of familiarity around rocks, and for me, a signal that the ocean is just beyond there. So that's also a form of like comfort or connection. Yeah, considering how much, I often think it's kind of odd or funny that considering how much I paint and look and draw rocks, I know very little about them, like like scientifically, and weirdly uninterested in the geology side of them and where they come from and how they were built. I've like sort of dipped my toe in that, but for me, that's not the interest for me. It's their form and what they speak of on a personal level for me that I think I'm drawn to. And I agree, like visiting different places, I'm always so interested in how rocks are different in each place. And even in Marrawah, you know, there's a beach at the bluff where they're jagged, sideways, sharp, out of the sand and out of the land. And then, you know, smoother, bobbly, knobbly rocks that, you know, 3 kilometres north at this other beach. And then, you know, the ones that were in front of my home were different again. And so it's, yeah, they're so distinctive to place. And that's always an interesting point, and probably something I look at when I go to different places is drawing the rocks is a great initial understanding of how that place is different to where I come from, and kind of locating it through engaging with the rocks and the shoreline. And
So after you just wrapped up your show last week, so what's next for you?
Right now I'm having a little break. Yeah, the show was a big one, this one, and I'm learning the value of taking these breaks afterwards and going on a holiday to another island, another remote, obscure island, but this time in the tropics and not the Arctic, the Cocos-Keeling Islands. So,
and why did you choose that?
Again, like this sort of intrigue in, it's like this sniffing out of places, the islands that are far away. Growing up, like my mum and dad love the tropics, and we would always travel to different little islands in the Pacific. So I think that formed some kind of intrigue or connection. And then more recently it's been trying to go to like the gnarliest parts in the Arctic, and I was just ready to return back to the tropics and get some nice warm weather and be on this tiny little interesting island very, very far away in the middle of the ocean. And yeah, having no phone reception and trying to switch off and have a little bit of space in the warm, and a little break from the Tasmanian winter doesn't hurt either.
So you're someone who likes extremes?
I guess so. I mean, I think I love my comforts as well. I think I like the learnings and the experiences that come afterwards, and being able to look back. And I think I find those kind of extremes challenging, and in the moment I don't love the challenge that you're in, but I do get some kind of sense of satisfaction when after doing kind of extreme or going to extreme places, especially doing that on my own. I'm not sure if it's like trying to prove something to myself or some level of independence, but yeah, the challenge and the growth that comes from it is something I'm quite attracted to.
It's quite I wouldn't say it's unusual, but it's not common for people to go to isolated places on their own. I mean, being an artist, I guess there might be more people who did that. But apart from proving to yourself or like the soul search, why? Do you know why you're doing that?
It probably comes back to my work and the things that I'm interested in exploring and the places that I'm interested in going and experiencing through making work about them. I don't know. It's the island thing. It's the remote thing. I guess it's these things that are familiar to me, but also like seeking out that unfamiliarity as well and the sense of remoteness and isolation. And it intrigues me. I think I have like quite a romantic idea about doing these things. I think it's also like a ruggedness or a roughness that I want to explore, or a pureness or honest kind of experiences and quite raw experiences can come from going to rogue, isolated places. And I think I seek that out. And yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. But I'm feeling like kind of at the moment full of that for now. I'm not feeling the urge to go anywhere big on my own again just yet. I'm feeling quite content on staying put for a little while.
You probably need a bit of nourishing after that experience of not realising how isolated you were actually going to put yourself.
Yeah.
That was sort of, you did plan to go to an isolated place, but you didn't plan to be completely on your own.
Totally.
Does your partner share this love for isolation? Did he know what he was getting himself into when he met you?
I don't know. I mean, I haven't dragged him anywhere like this yet. I think Marrawah and as a part of my identity it shines, through me. So I think he had a really strong understanding of how important that place was to me and what that place was. He spends he works, he's a vineyard on the East Coast and this sort of tiny little hut situation in the bush. So he's spending, most days by himself in the bush. So he's quite like sort of seasoned for alone time and quite enjoys it as well. Yeah, I think it's maybe something we can explore together too.
That's lovely.
Yeah. And looking forward to spending some time in Marrawah and, as I said, moving there more permanently. And I think going away was a big point of realising that I think I'm ready to be there more permanently. And, being in Marrawah and in isolated areas, you lose so many beautiful things. Here in Hobart, I have really special friends that I connect with and artists and access to materials and all these different cultural events that you really do have to give up in isolation. And the social aspect is totally shrunk to, and the possibilities of events and stuff. But I'm ready for the other offerings that it has, that outweighing what I will lose here, and wanting to really return to living very closely with the environment around me and building a life that kind of, enhances that with a veggie garden and, surfing every day and being, experiencing the weather. I'm ready for those things to be at the forefront of my life again.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's the lovely thing about being an artist, is that you can keep doing that there. You don't have to go and hope that there's a job opportunity.
I know, it's lucky, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, it's not exactly luck, I wouldn't say. But there's a lot of hard work there.
Yeah.
But, it can be rewarded, and that's great.
Yeah. I mean, I feel lucky. I feel lucky that I happen to love being an artist and have some level of skill in it, although most of my skill I think has been learned and, practiced, and I've worked hard for that. But I feel lucky that I love it and get to do it and am able to survive on it, because it's not the case for all artists, I guess. But yeah, you're right, it is also a lot of hard work and lonely at times and all those other things that making art is as well.
Just one last question then. When did you know you wanted to be an artist?
Yeah. It was like a slow evolution, a slow understanding of what that was and what that meant and how that could fit into how I see myself. I was not born with an innate ability to perfectly draw pictures or, art was something I came to more in my teenage years when I was very interested in ideas and understanding the world through politics and music and art and writing, and I was very interested in those things, and through that art was a way for me to explore that. And then through college I had some, in year 11 and 12 on the Northwest Coast, I really sort of dug in then and had some great teachers and went to art school. But even at art school I was uncomfortable with labelling myself as an artist and didn't ever think it would be something I did full time, didn't have confidence in it or feeling that was who I could be. And even still, it's only in the last few years probably that I really feel that this is what I'm doing, this is who I am, and I'm an artist. It's a funny label. Yeah, and I know it's what I want to be doing. Feels, I think you're always there's always this imposter syndrome of worrying that I'm some kind of fraud and that, this is really truly authentic and, all those things. But, I just try and stay really honest to myself and my work, and that's all you can do, and keep making and keep working hard on interrogating your practice. And yeah, and that's what being an artist is to me. So then that's what I am.
I love it. I love that story, and I love it that you describe it as a slow burn. Yet you've had, 6 solo shows by 29 or something. So doesn't seem very slow to me.
This is true.
Anyway, thank you very much, Zoe, for coming along. It's been really interesting.
Thank you, Sarah. I've really enjoyed talking and reflecting and thinking about place and making. It's been really great.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the first episode of Art Destinations Tasmania. Our next fortnightly conversation will be with one of the world's leading philosophers on place, Jeff Malpas. We asked Jeff what a philosopher does. Where does he do his best thinking? And why does place play such a strong role in what we think? And how does he explain the notion of the zeitgeist when similar ideas start to emerge among people who are not connected? Be reminded about this next episode on Thinking with Jeff Malpas by subscribing to our fortnightly newsletter on our website, artdestinations.org. I'm your host, Sarah Rhodes. Ciao for now.